More than 150 victims of apartheid-era crimes have been camping outside the Constitutional Court recently. Their demand is that government pay them 1.5 million rand for injuries sustained during the apartheid years. Let's get an update with Majorie Jobson, who's the National Director at the Khulumani Support Group, which is leading this movement. A very good afternoon to you, ma'am. Thankful for your time. So let's begin first with the profiles of who has been gathered outside the Constitutional Court, how they suffered, and why they feel they've been hard done by today's government.
Okay, so the group outside the Constitutional Court are led by Ms. Noma Rasha Bonasi, who used to be our national organizer and who became very, very frustrated with the slow pace of any progress in the negotiations with the Department of Justice. And so they have become sort of self-governing and separate from the whole structure of Khulumani. We are not actually part, the whole membership. Khulumani has 130,000 members. So this is a very small part of the membership, and I fully understand the absolute frustration that there's no progress. This is the third sleep-in since May, through winter, in terrible conditions with very frail elderly people. So I'm very familiar with the people mainly from the East Rand, but we have not put this action in place. We are trying different strategies because this group is wanting to claim 1 million rand each. We said that is not possible. We have to produce a shift in the attitude of the president, because the president was made ultimately responsible for reparations. That's why the fund is called the President's Fund. But it is handled through the Department of Justice, which hosts the fund. And the frustration is that the TRC itself only took 22,500 statements, which is a fraction of the number of people who suffered such gross violations. And the decisions have remained unchanged since the adoption in Parliament of the Promotion of National Unity and Reconciliation Act, which was formed without there was no blueprint. I can well remember being involved with the first commissioners, and they were shaping this thing without anything to draw on. You know, the other cases, like the German claims cases, were criminal cases. They weren't the kind of process we were trying to do to achieve sort of an accommodation of both sides, both opposing groups of people. And so the fact that the Department of Justice will not shift any decisions, they completely exclude those people who are camping at Constitutional Court, are completely excluded. They have been told by Ronald Lamola and Crispin Phiri that they will never get reparations. But then the reparations agenda has barely been touched by people, even, since the TRC unit was set up in 2005.
To be clear, Marjorie, just on the point that you were making that these are people who are likely to never get money, I was looking at an article, I think 2-3 days ago, where Crispin Phiri, spokesperson for the Justice Department, was in fact quoted saying that people who have previously received monies will not get more for reparations. Would this apply to each and every one of the 100 plus pensioners who've been gathered outside the Constitutional Court?
So the people that Crispin Phiri is referring to are the people who were very, very fortunate to get a number that qualified them for reparations. The majority, I think virtually almost all of the people camping at Concourt, did not qualify for reparations because the TRC process was never extended to allow ongoing registration. So the fact that the purpose of reparations was to meet the needs of people who suffered the gross violations of apartheid, but the door closed after 18 months of taking statements, and only 22,000 statements were taken. So the number of people who are still suffering from the terrible harms that they carry in their bodies today do not qualify because they didn't get their foot in the door of the TRC. And that is something we have been contesting because it is nowhere acceptable to arbitrarily exclude victims of those atrocities. That's what the issue is, and we haven't managed to persuade government. President Ramaphosa sometimes comments on reparations, but never about reparations for apartheid crimes. He speaks at the United Nations about reparations for slavery and colonialism. But we need him to finally say, let's do this. There are only about 120,000 people who missed out, and we can do it. And we have 2 billion rand in the reparations fund. And we've submitted endless plans for how best to reach the most people possible, but we have been stonewalled by the attitudes of the Department of Justice from when it's over years now.
So just on your submissions, one of the things that Crispin Petrie is quoted saying in recent days is that what they've asked for is a list of eligible people among this group to then be submitted in order for their cases to be taken forward. Have you made that submission?
So the eligible group are the people whom the TRC, from whom the TRC received statements. Most of these people never had the opportunity to make a statement because the so-called civil war of the East Rand continued through to 1999. That is beyond the cutoff date for applying to the TRC to even take part in being interviewed by the TRC. That's where they are. These issues are not difficult to solve, but there has to be an agreement that reparations could be such a catalytic development process for victims. We've worked so hard on using the time of waiting to teach and instill people, and the fact that they are just not even prepared to consider having victims participate with them in jointly formulating plans to solve the problem is hugely problematic. We had a submission at the UN last week on the 13th of November, and it was this week on Monday, I think, and it was our work from the African continent on how reparations can be so dramatically catalytic on providing healing and economic reintegration. And it was very well received at the United Nations, but we have yet to get through to our own officials. They have had this attitude from 2000, when the National Archives that hosted all the records of the TRC was told to do nothing with them, and then National Intelligence went through everything that was there because they did not want any ANC people to be prosecuted. So the history is a terrible history, especially given, the kudos we won as a country for what we did in terms of equating the crimes of both sides of the conflict and holding them to the same standards, which was very unique historically, but we haven't come through on solving this problem.
But if this is the latest of multiple sit-ins in recent months, do you really believe that it will be effective, given that previous ones have failed to yield results?
This is why the Khulumani, not the breakaway group, which is the Galena group at Conhill now, we don't believe that strategy will succeed, but that's a strategy of absolute desperation to get something. And we have been alerted that it's highly likely that the 1.8 billion actually left in the Victims' Reparations Fund is likely to be diverted for other purposes. And that's very, very scary. We are hearing about some people who have been signed up recently. I mean, our database, we have an exquisite database, a real community archive. We have never been able to get any inroad with government in terms of saying, look, here's the limited number of people we need to deal with, and we can do it. And we've worked out how the money that is there could address the largest number of people, but it is like what they call a conversation with the deaf, deliberately deaf.
Majorie Jobson, good to speak to you. Thank you, ma'am.